I know who you are. We've spoken many times in your capacity at Islip. But after doing some research on you here, I see why you're as successful as you are. You've been driven for many, many years and basically everything that you've touched. So Angie Carpenter is a public servant whose current role is the Islip Town Supervisor. She was involved, right, years ago with Little League and Boy Scouts, PTA when when your kids were younger. She worked on a program, Latchkey Kids, where kids go home without parents there or supervision. She was also a founding member of Yes and Ask Us, school-age kids programs. She's a member of the Salvation Army Advisory Board, past president of our board of Our Lady of Consolation, and former chair of the Catholic Health Services Continuing Care Board and the Vanderbilt Board of Trustees. Was also president of West Islip Chamber of Commerce. She was elected as Suffolk County treasurer. She became the first woman supervisor of the town of Islip in more than its 300-year history, and then she was reelected to serve an additional term. And with that, Clem Cote, let me introduce you as our moderator this morning.
Thanks so much, guys. I apologize for being late. Welcome to the Economic Development Committee Association, the second webinar for the year 2022. Today is our guest, Angie Carpenter, Supervisor, Town of Islip. Now, CIBS is an organization that has recognized the need to support smart growth development, regionally significant infrastructure projects, and the importance of monitoring state and local legislation that impacts Long Island's long-term economic growth and addresses our quality of life interests through the Economic Development Advocacy Committee, which consists of myself, Dan Wiener, Ted Strategos, Eric Launer, Peter Curry, and Dave Panetta. CIBS has supported a number of smart growth, mixed-use, transit-oriented developments, and recently recognized proposed legislation for allowing the self-certification of building permits and construction documents as worthy for our support. So today's program will focus on several initiatives that the town of Islip has implemented to support economic activity and more specifically work that the town has done to develop and grow Long Island MacArthur Airport. So after years in the private sector as a business owner, Angie Carpenter began her tenure in the government in February 1993 when she elected to the position of legislator of the 11th Legislative District in a special election. In the legislature, Angie was known for her persistent efforts on behalf of all her constituents, having served as a member of nearly every committee in the legislature, and she was elected unanimously for the 2 terms as deputy presiding officer. After a long and successful 13 years at Suffolk County Legislator, Angie was elected Suffolk County Treasurer in November 2005. As treasurer, Angie immersed herself in the latest information in government finance, including serving as a board member for the New York State Government Finance Officers Association, a position she still holds. And Angie ultimately served as Suffolk County Treasurer for 9 years. Angie's many years of government experience and her experience as a former business owner led the town of Islip to appoint her to the position of Town of Islip Supervisor in March of 2015. In November 2015, the voters of Islip validated the town board's action, electing Angie Carpenter to the full 4-year term, subsequently re-electing her in November 2019. Angie continues to engage residents to work together to revitalize town-owned land, Long Island MacArthur Airport, promote business, increase efforts to ensure that the needs of all Islip residents are met in a cost-effective and compassionate manner. And I am pleased to introduce Supervisor Angie Carpenter to say a few words. Welcome, Supervisor.
Thank you so much. So listening to all of that bio information, a little long, sorry about that. But really the thing that I hold near and dear and I think is of most value is the fact that I started a business many, many years ago. Started it in the house, grew it, wound up buying a building, expanding the business, But in 93, well, actually in the early 90s, both my sons came to work there. And over the years with community involvement, I had been encouraged to run for office. So at that point, since they were at the business, it gave me the opportunity to say, you know what, guys, you know, this would have been yours someday anyway. It's yours now. I'm out of here. And I never looked back. You know, the business is still there, thank God. And my son seems to be holding on with all the challenges all business owners have now. But it's that experience in business, that experience in the private sector that I think serves me and all of those that I've been elected to serve well. I really feel that sometimes when you're interacting with people that have grown up in government and really don't have a clue what it is to, you know, own or run a business, work in a business, worry about meeting payroll, etc. It's very, very hard to get through to them. I have to tell you, in the town of Islip, we're really, even though we are a developed township, there's still much opportunity for growth, and we are seizing upon that. Certainly, it's no secret that to live, work, or especially to do business here isn't easy. It's expensive. And the only way we're going to survive as a region is to grow our base. And to that end, you know, we in the town have been very fortunate. We've had quite a few pieces of property that were off the tax rolls and now have an opportunity to get them on the tax rolls. The first that comes to mind is the New York Tech property that originally had been Central Islip Psychiatric Hospital. A couple of, I guess it was in 16 or 17 that they started. There's a project there now, Farrell Communities, that was on the former property. They've reused some of the buildings. Also, during my tenure, the Steel Equities and the Marcus organization purchased 87 acres on that parcel there that was New York Tech, and for an adaptive reuse. All 14 buildings that were on that property are being reused. And they're building one huge community center, and there are plans down the future for mixed use. But right now, they're working on the 364 unit apartment complex. They're building a new community center. It's going to have a lot of amenities, and it really is going to enhance the business communities that is adjacent to that. Further north on Carlton Avenue, we were able to secure a $10 million grant from New York State Economic Development for the downtown revitalization, and that's a little less than 2 mile strip from Suffolk Avenue south to Smith, to really create a sense of downtown and community in an area that, you know, I don't know how the zoning permitted it, but over the years, we've got things like muffler shops and auto body shops and, you know, churches and bodegas, and, you know, it should be a thriving downtown business community. And that was the intent of my pitch to economic development. They bought it, and we're, you know, working on it. A little bit of a delay because of COVID, but we're finally moving forward. At the north end, we were able to cobble together some parcels, one owned by a local civic, another owned by church, another was county brownfield site, an area owned by the town. We put those parcels together, hired a consultant, did an RFP, and now there's a mixed use development that is planned for that area. So, you know, I think what I've tried to demonstrate is that sense of, you know, moving forward with development, appropriate development, sustainable development, trying to engage the community so that we're not faced with this constant NIMBYs. You know, people all agree that taxes are too high and they don't want their taxes going up. and they all agree that they like their services and they don't want to cut any services. So I keep telling them, then the only answer is you have to have development. And so anyone that comes in with a project, I urge them to meet with the community, try to shape the project so that you can get community buy-in. You're never going to get 100%, but if you can get, you know, a little bit of buy-in from the community, it makes it that much easier. We have the Tri-Tech development in downtown Bayshore on a 10-acre parcel that once upon a time when I was in the county legislature, that was the county's mini center, they called it. And we had all kinds of less than appropriate uses for downtown, methadone clinic, you know, unemployment office, courts. It was just a whole plethora of different uses. And eventually Toro School of Health Sciences approached us about going in there, and we structured a deal. They took over the debt that was left on it, and they allowed the county to keep the health center. And at the time we had the highway patrol there, they were able to stay there 7 years rent-free, and then they paid off the remaining debt. And then Toro School of Health Sciences, which kind of worked nicely with the health center, so the students had clinical time in the health center, that was very successful. And recently Toro decided to relocate that portion of their college to the campus in CI that houses the law school. So they're really expanding that campus, creating more of a sense of campus, eventually planning to put dorms in. So that kind of all made sense. So on that 10-acre site, Tri-Tech is transforming it into a true transit-oriented development across the street from the train station, bus stop right in front, 2 blocks from the ferries that take you over Fire Island. And that is going to be 418 units that really will create a vibrant downtown community that will help bring more businesses, more, you know, fannies in the seats in the restaurants, a lot more activity. Again, truly a walkable community. You know, we're lucky too in the town. We've got the foreign trade zone, and that for the first time is expanding 120,000 square feet. This, the trade zone's a 52-acre property at the airport. There are 35 businesses in there, and now we're going to be adding 3 new buildings. That's kind of exciting. Not any town that I know of locally has a foreign trade zone. Also, the 14 buildings that have been built on this land, this expansion is the first that we've had in over 30 years. And then we've got the airport. You know, that is so very exciting to me. We recently unveiled a new state-of-the-art 12,000 square foot ground transportation center. We moved the car rental and any ground transportation that any travelers need into one central location, freeing up some space inside the terminal, you know, obviously that we need. The ground transportation center, it's beautiful, modern facility. You know, if people have a delay, it's a comfortable environment for them to be waiting in. And in addition to that, we're really excited about the new air service. Southwest began flying nonstop to Nashville last year during the pandemic, which was kind of interesting that when many small airports across the country had to close, our airport never closed a day, albeit service was diminished. At one point, there was like 1 flight a day, but our airport never closed. We immediately got into gear and brought in this Casper technology that purifies the air and removes 99% of the germs in the air. And we put the Silver Defender on all high touch areas. So it made the traveling public that uses our airport feel comfortable, feel safe, so that we were able to keep moving. One of the most exciting things recently, JetBlue founder, David Neilman, started up a new airline. It's his 5th airline, Breeze, and they started flying last June. But in February, they announced that their New York regional airport was going to be Islip MacArthur. So they've started with service to Charleston, South Carolina, and Norfolk, Virginia. They're going to be offering one-stop service to New Orleans. And, you know, there's every indication that this is really just the beginning of the service that Breeze is going to be bringing to the New York area. He's ordered 80 planes. He's getting 1 a month. So they clearly are expanding their service. And Frontier Airlines, they relaunched their service to Fort Lauderdale that they had done just seasonally, but that's back in. And they've also announced that they're going to be bringing back the direct service to Raleigh-Durham. So on the air service side, for the first time ever, we've engaged a professional air service development team to interact with the airlines to get that service here, but not, you know, here today, gone tomorrow, but rather service that will be there into the future. Also, I'm sure many of you have heard, there's been a lot of interest in a huge development at the airport. You know, remember we have over 1,300 acres of property at that airport, and a very renowned development firm, JLL, Jones LaSalle, has expressed interest in a development Midway Crossing, and it's given us the impetus. We had already begun really seriously considering moving the terminal to the north side, which actually is where it should have been from the beginning. And we've gone through all of that due diligence and hearings, et cetera. But we're very serious about that. And that certainly makes it so much more attractive to have the terminal adjacent to the railroad. And with the 3rd rail that's going to be commencing this fall, coming into Ronkonkoma, it's going to be bringing all of those people out from the city who will be using our airport more than they are now. So things are exciting, things are happening, and certainly the focus is on development. And I was pleased to hear David earlier talk about how you've embraced and supported some of the projects. And, you know, that is so very important, because oftentimes when a town in particular, a planning board, a town board has an application before them, generally you're only going to get the people that don't want change, you know, leave it alone, or we like it the way it is. It's so important to have balance. It's so important for those who are being faced with making that decision at that point in time, understand that, you know, there is a balance to be had, and there are 2 sides, and you need to take everything into consideration. And as I said earlier, if we're going to survive, you know, as a region, we need to continue to grow our base.
So I want to thank you for coming out and taking the time that you're spending with us. First of all, how should I address you?
Angie's great.
Okay, I was going to go with Your Excellency or anything like that, but you know.
No, that wouldn't work.
So, okay, so great. So look, and I think a lot of the viewers here will agree with me that it's refreshing to see somebody in your position really get it and understand what needs to get done. I mean, I'm personally a progress junkie. So when I drive down some of these roads and I see, you know, a mishmash of development and how things were done in the past, we're trying to correct those mistakes, which is extremely expensive given the tax levels and the amount of time you spend in, you know, the zoning board of appeals and the planning department to get things done with some of these towns. And, you know, oftentimes it's a very draconian process, and the civic associations, while the original intent of those groups was to protect the local community, I find that they have very little skin in the game and a lot to say, and oftentimes shoot down some really, really good projects. So I applaud you for having many of these things, many of the projects you mentioned, take shape and move forward. Like I'll give you an example. So there was a property on West Main Street in Bayshore. I think it was 307. It was like the corner of Sunset Drive. This thing has been sitting vacant since I've been in the business in '98. And it's just like, why can't anyone get their heads around this thing and make it work? And it appears that now that it's been demolished and it's finally going to happen. I mean, do you know anything about that you could share that we don't know?
He is before the planning board right now. He, as of right, could have just created a strip center with retail. He's reconfigured it and wants to do a mixed use with apartments above, retail, retail/office below. It was heard. There was some questions. Decision was reserved, and I do believe it will be up before the planning board at their next meeting. So hopefully we'll finally see that moving along. That really has been, there've been a number of suggestions, projects that were put forward and unfortunately got shot down. But this is the first time in my tenure that I'm actually looking at something for that parcel.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the middle of everything and it's at everybody's front door. So like, I know with COVID, the process that was normally not a quick one got slowed down even further. And many of the towns, rather than taking the opportunity to input data and to clean up the old microfiche and stuff like that, really didn't do it. And they didn't take advantage of this downtime that they had where nobody was coming in and approaching them from the public sector. So how do you feel?
Can I just say something? I have to, again, because of how strongly I feel about how we have to keep moving, we had to find a way to keep doing business, and we did. We immediately created a lockbox where a person could drop off their plans. In fact, what we did was say, call us, let us know that you've dropped it in the box, sit in your car, we'll take a cursory look at it, make sure you've got all of the pieces there before you leave. If you don't, take it back and, get what you need, but at least let us have a cursory review and keep things moving along. So we really did not skip a beat. We got those outdoor dining permits the minute the state allowed that to happen. We were turning those permits around in a day. In fact, we didn't even charge for them. And we recently extended that through January of next year, the outdoor dining permits. And that's been a lifeline for many of those restaurants.
Oh, I agree. And I think that's great that that's the initiative you guys took. But I know many towns, like you go in there and you submit your first application and it's pretty much guaranteed you're getting a denial rather than, a partial comment or, I guess a sense of hope for that your project's actually going to go through in less than 3 years. Like, how do we fix that process? How do you plan on really changing things and possibly spearheading it for everybody else and other towns around you?
We try to encourage, especially if it's a sizable development, to come in and meet with us ahead of time. Before you go down the road of engaging architects and having drawings and elevations and everything done and finding out, oh, wait a minute, that project's never going to work there. Come in and have the conversation. Certainly it's not going to be, exactly what ultimately will be approved, but at least you get a sense of if it is at all doable or not.
Gotcha.
And I will say one thing. Our previous planning commissioner decided to move on, actually move home probably is more accurate. He was from the Midwest. We thought he was going to relocate here permanently, but never did. But in spite of that, gave us a couple of great years, but had the philosophy of working with potential developers, trying to find a way to make things work. And when we were interviewing for his replacement, I put it out there. That was so important to us here in the town. I need someone that subscribes to that philosophy and understands time is money, and you can't be wasting people's time and think they're going to spend 3, 4, 5, 10 years, on a project before they can get a shovel in the ground. So we have hired a new planning commissioner. She will be starting at the end of the month. And I'm proud to say she comes from the private sector. And, I think that's really, really important.
I agree.
I have a question, and you might have touched on this, and it's playing off what Clem had asked a little bit, but as brokers, we hear from developers and our clients how difficult it is to get done in many of the towns, and yet Islip has a reputation as one of the easiest towns under, is this part of really, can you attribute this to your personal leadership style, or is it an overall sentiment of the planning board, or maybe a combination of both that allows you to get things done?
Well, to hear you say we're easy, that's great, but we do follow the rules. I will tell you that. And we have to. These people have licenses, site plan reviewers, engineers, et cetera, and they don't want to jeopardize their credentials, nor would we ever ask anyone to. But when I first got here, I found out we had 27 vacancies in the planning and building department. So, that was my immediate priority, to get those people in place. You can't get projects moving if you don't have an adequate amount of site plan reviewers, and likewise in engineering, inspectors, et cetera. So making that commitment, making that investment in your planning department, in your engineering department is key. It really, really is. Even from a revenue perspective, the revenues that are generated from, site plans and, permit fees, et cetera, really helps towards the bottom line and really helps you keep taxes flat, so that people are not feeling like they're so oppressed and they have no choice but to pick up and move to Tennessee or Texas or Florida because the cost of living is getting too, unbearable here. So there's a lot of reasons for why that's important, but making that commitment and investment to appropriate staffing for these departments, giving them that support, and basically having them back.
So I'd like to take you back to when you were a business owner, if you could kind of like shed some light on what type of business you ran, and at what point were you realized something else needed to be done, and there was just a higher calling and took you to that point in '93 where you went for elected office.
It was funny. I had a graphic arts, started out as a typesetting business. It doesn't even exist any longer. It's all morphed into desktop publishing, et cetera. But I can remember one of the first things that got me engaged was when the state legislature was contemplating, or no, maybe it was the Suffolk County legislature, was contemplating the VDT legislation. And what it was, video display terminals. And, this is when the computer industry was really taking off. And they were saying that anybody that employed someone that sat at a screen, they had to have a 5-point footed chair. They had to have, X amount of breaks. They had to have such kind of lighting. And I'm like, this is absolutely crazy. And the legislation was designed to affect those that had greater than, say, 20 or 50 employees. And even though it didn't impact me personally, because I maybe had 10 employees, I said, this isn't right. My employees are going to feel like, well, I want that kind of chair too, and it didn't make sense. It was just overkill and overreach into the private sector. And I got involved in the LIA, became an advocate for the small business community, worked very closely with the LIA when I was a small business owner. And that kind of involvement and having people say you should get involved in public office, you should run. And again, when my sons were at the business, I knew I could do that. I knew I could walk away and hopefully make a difference. And again, that business kind of attitudes in my DNA. And even when I was in the legislature, and when you're part of a legislative body, it's like you feel compelled to have legislation. I never did. I felt like I was there representing the community. If they had issues, I tried to tackle them, but I never felt like I had to have my name on a law. And anytime legislation would come up, I would say, well, how is this really, this isn't very practical. How are the businesses going to do this? In fact, I did create legislation that required an economic analysis for what the economic impact might be on any given sector on legislation that was being proposed. That you couldn't just go write a law and not think about what the consequences might be down the road.
Gotcha. So I think that's great that you made the transcendence from that sector to the public sector, and it really kind of kept your roots in mind with what you plan on doing and how you plan on getting things to work. I mean, look, you know, we're on an island, and if you look at how many, I'll use this as an example, how many waterfront restaurants there are per square mile as compared to Florida or any other state that has waterfront, I would say we're lacking by far.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It just like trying to get, when you think about things to do on Long Island, I feel like there's so much more room for those types of opportunities, and they're not there. And you know, I realize that the price of real estate on the waterfront is very high. A lot of times the municipalities own the restaurant and they, with the intent of preserving it. But I feel that there's a blend that can happen that can stimulate this. I mean, what's your opinion on that?
Well, we've done that here in the town, both in East Islip and Islip, where we turned around and solicited the private sector to come in and run those operations so that we could maximize. In fact, in one case, we're helping facilitate connection to the sewer so that he can expand his operation and hopefully be more than just seasonal. You know, I think, again, looking at our assets, protecting them, taking care of them, but maximizing them. Last year, we went out to bid on the operation of Atlantique Marina. I mean, that's 158 slip marina owned by the town on the bay, but literally, you know, 100 feet from the ocean. That property straddles both the bay and the ocean. And it was like not really being maximized. It needed a lot of repairs. So we did an RFP, and you would think I was selling my firstborn. It was a little contentious, but after all was said and done, we had the fortitude to know that this was the right thing to do. The ultimate person who won the RFP was a combination entity between Strong's Marina and Grover in Freeport, Strong's in Greenport. And between the two of them, they had 150 years of marina operation experience. So rather than having this operated by seasonal employees and maybe overseen by a supervisor, we've got somebody in the marina business who's in there operating it, and the long-term lease includes a commitment on their part to do capital improvements. They're working on the bulkheading and the docking and everything else that needs to be done piecemeal, obviously not all at once, but it is getting done without, you know, costing the taxpayers additional, and it's working. And even those who were the loudest complainers, you know, have said, wow, this is great.
Yeah, they're all going to frequent the restaurant afterward. We all know that. But so piggybacking off that, like the sewer system has been a major issue for Long Island. Many developments can't happen because of the lack of it. What is the town of Islip doing? And I realize some of it has to do with the county, so it's not completely.
Well, the county, and again, we've been very engaged. I mean, we're a township, I'm the supervisor, but I can't operate in an island. I have to work with our, you know, colleagues in all levels of government, whether it's Congressman Andrew Garbarino down in Washington, who has been an incredible partner. And when you talk about sewers, got us $3 million for a sewer connection in central Islip. And, you know, that's huge, because when we got that $10 million from the state of New York for that downtown corridor in CI, we were lacking that sewer connection. And they were adamant they didn't want any of the money used for sewers. And I'm like, you don't understand. You know, we have to have that. So I was able to get them to allow us to use $2 million for the sewers. So with that $2 million and Andrew's $3 million and We got some money from the IDA and from the CDA and some grant money. We're going to have that sewer connection. And the county stepped up to the plate, and the county executive at their meeting introduced a certificate of necessity, and they approved a $2.5 million kind of bridging that gap to hook up that sewer and CI. So that's going to mean we're going to get some really cool restaurants who are going to be able to, all the wet uses that you couldn't get without having that access to the sewers. And certainly on the South Shore, when you talk about restaurants on the waterfront, part of the problem too is that you're lacking that sewer connection. You know, the Sayville, you know, West Sayville, Oakdale, Great River area needs to be sewered, and we've, you know, put that on our priority list.
And I think, like, I was having a conversation with one of the other the board members a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how, like, oftentimes members of a planning commission or a zoning board and appeals, they're not really real estate people by trade. And I'm wondering if there's maybe some sort of a committee a town should put together to involve the opinions of people that live this on a daily basis, and whether it's pro bono or whatever, just as kind of an auxiliary, consultative group.
Well, been there, done that, and we have it in place. So I don't know who the council person was that you were speaking to, but you know, when I got here 7 years ago, one of the first things I did was create a business advisory group, bringing in the developers, sitting down there with the head of the planning department so that they could hear from the other side of the counter what it's like and what needed to be addressed, what needs to be better. And that has been a tremendous, tremendous resource for us to get that institutional knowledge from those that are using the services to help make things better. Likewise, with the airport, we put together, and it's still in existence, an airport advisory board, and have, you know, stakeholders. And I have people that are so committed, volunteers. I mean, one gentleman who's a developer that lives in Manhattan travels to town hall for an 8 o'clock in the morning meeting because he is so committed and so believes in the mission of the airport and how important it is to us as a region to, you know, maximize what we've got there. So I wholeheartedly agree. We don't have all the answers. We can't do it alone. I just delivered the State of the Town address, and basically it was about partnerships and how important it was for us to partner, not just with other levels of government, but certainly with the private sector. And people want to help out. I was at a meeting about 3 years ago, and when I was talking about what my goals were, one of them being to create a Parks Foundation, much as they did in New York State, to try to generate more revenue, not just from taxpayers. And after the meeting was over, I had 3 people come up to me and say, I'll help you with that. So from 3 years ago to today, we have a 501c3, not-for-profit, the Islip Town Parks Foundation, and that foundation is on the cusp of breaking ground on a Serenity Garden, which is the first of its kind, to address the needs of various user groups, those who might be on the autism spectrum or developmentally disabled, blind, seniors, vets, you know, a whole plethora of those with special needs to come together in one park that's on a campus that has things that, you know, a family can come together and everyone can feel like they have something to do. And that's all without spending any taxpayer dollars. So that's kind of exciting. But again, utilizing the private sector.
So Angie, I you know, not only are you working with Suffolk County, but with the Ronkonkoma hub, you're also working with Brookhaven, you know, which is an adjacent township. You know, just so people understand, the MacArthur Airport, that was made before the expressway was up past 57. So it seems like, well, why shouldn't the airport have always been more leaning towards the expressway? There was no expressway there before the early 60s. But it's great that you are trying to move forward. I know you've gotten big grants recently and funding to move that forward. But the one point I want to make is, Angie, I was handling the sale of St. John's University campus, which was 175 acres, 12 buildings. And when we first got hired, I asked you if I could come in and meet, and you were very available. We came in, we discussed, about generating taxes and the neighborhood and the concerns. And it gave us a direction. I mean, we wound up selling it to another educational institution, but it did give a little bit of help, talking a little bit to Clem, that, something that we would have brought in to purchase or develop the property should align with what, the town board and supervisor is directing you initially on. So it doesn't take like a Sierra Wire. It took 25 years to happen over in Syosset.
Yeah. Or look at what happened with Heartland, that project. I mean, I was in the legislature when Jerry Wolkoff bought that 80 acres from the state.
Right.
And he invited me to tour the property, and he was so excited. And he was talking about the project in Reston, Virginia, and that was what he envisioned, this city, and the Brentwood community deserved this kind of development. And oh my God, he was so excited.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. And I left the legislature in 2006, went to the treasurer's office, still nothing happened. I come here in 2015, and one of the first projects I had to deal with was Heartland. And I'm like, oh my God, it's been 15 years and nothing happened. Jerry, what are we going to do? And ultimately, it was very contentious. I'll never forget that public hearing. We had 144 speakers, and it went until midnight, and it was very organized, and half the room wanted the development and half didn't want it. So ultimately, the compromise was that we approved the first phase, that there were 3 phases to this project. We approved phase 1. Let's see how it goes. Jerry wasn't happy. He wanted all 3 because it would have helped him with his financing. But we really felt that was the judicious way to go, and at least we were getting it moving. It still hasn't moved. There are some issues with the county and the connection to the sewer, but hopefully we're going to be seeing ground being broken there while we're still all alive.
Well, you're surrounded with good people at Islip. I was talking out at the Long Island Business Development Group out in Montauk some years ago. Bill Mannix was there, and he said, he raised his hand and he asked a question at the end, and he said, Dave, he said, and he was talking about Wolkoff and Heartland, and he said, look, we have the Rutgers study on children being put into school systems from market rate apartments. We got the George Washington University study. We have all these studies, but we don't have a Long Island study aligned with the university. He says, could you produce that? And CIBS is a big supporter of the Real Estate Institute at SUNY Stony Brook. And we, from Bill's, asking the question, it was deemed a very, good topic. And we produced a white paper, that showed that it took 11 units to make one school-age kid. And that was looking at all Long Island developments. It was done by SUNY Stony Brook, so it's as squeaky clean as it could be. But that all started with Bill Mannix.
And we still see Bill. Bill retired. But the gentleman that worked alongside Bill for 6 years before Bill left, John Walzer, is now heading up economic development. And he and Bill, touch base quite often. And, I have since started going to that conference out there. And it's been very productive, quite frankly, because in a venue like that, someone will come up with an idea that you can take and run and really help make a difference so that we can achieve that ultimate goal. And I love the name of your committee, that you're the Economic Development Advocacy Committee.
Yeah.
And that is so, so needed. And I salute you for that. And thank you for that.
Angie, I just have to ask one question. There's a question from one of the members, and it's Angie. Thank you for addressing CIBS. What is your position on self-certification?
I don't have a problem with that. We have been, it's under consideration now. There is some that are concerned about it, but I just feel that, you know, with self-certification, that person that's doing the certifying has a license and they're not going to want to jeopardize it. So those that are afraid of that, you know, I would say, you know, let's go with it. So we are strongly considering it right now.
So basically, what are your plans for the future? Like, where do you see this going? What's high on your priority list? And I'll even ask you, like, what do you think other towns are doing correctly that maybe you will model after, or in fact pioneer and they'll model after you?
Well, you know, I'm not adverse to taking someone's idea and running with it. I'll give them credit for it. You know, we're not going to think of everything. My immediate plans, I'm planning on running for election next year. So I just want to put it out there. And that's important because for too long, we did not have, there was a revolving door here of supervisors. And it's very difficult when you're working with someone, not knowing whether they're going to be there when you get to step 2, 3, and 4 in your project. And, you know, I do plan on running, and God willing, I'm successful in being reelected. But I want to finish a lot of the initiatives that we've started. And the airport, obviously being one of them, I think that's so important to us as a region in creating the interest in developing. There's still a lot of potential in the immediate area to the airport to be developed, and certainly to put programs and mechanisms in place to make sure that we stay business friendly going forward into the future.
I've actually kind of noticed, like, over the years that for whatever reason, it's been the previous stance of the town of Islip that retail was not really welcomed on 454. I never quite understood that. I mean, to me, that you do have your offices and your industrial, and I understand the convenience of the street, but I always felt that there should be a stronger retail component. I mean, if you look at how many restaurants there are, I mean, McDonald's and the one next to it and a few other little mom and pops, but there really isn't much.
Well, it's better than it was. And I have to give credit to, you know, the planning commissioner who was here, Ron Meyer, who did tackle that issue and revisited some of the really onerous, you know, code restrictions that were in place, and has sort of loosened up some, because you wouldn't have had the quick check that's there. You wouldn't have had the McDonald's that's there now. So again, I know our new planning commissioner is very much embracing of that philosophy of sustainable, appropriate development.
So
And do you feel that do you feel there'll be a point where, you know, everyone's always concerned that there's going to be too many apartments and it's going to be too developed and it's going to tax the school system too much? Like, have you kind of seen that tipping point coming yet, or we still have a long way to go?
In some areas, I would say, you know, like in the hamlet of Bayshore, there were so many projects that were on the books, and it seems like they've just all started, you know, happening at once, and people are starting to panic, you know, oh my God, you know, we don't want to be Queens, there's too many apartments here. But no developer worth his salt is going to build a building that they don't think they're going to fill, you know, and there is a tremendous, tremendous need for housing. And again, everybody talks about affordable housing. It's so expensive to live here, but these apartments are getting filled, you know, at rents that you wouldn't think they could be. But there's a whole different generation now, and they want the amenities. They want a granite top in their kitchen, and they want, you know, high-end appliances, and they're willing to pay for it.
Yeah, Clem, well, so one thing that we don't understand and the developers don't understand is Angie, their town board, planning board, zoning board are privy to more information than we have. That's why it's important to go meet with them before you make an application. You don't want Vets Highway to be a Jericho Turnpike where
Oh, hell
you've got
no.
stripped. So that's a reason why some of the, because I know the zoning there, if you were within like 300 feet of the main road, there was more restrictions. But there's reasons for it. And you have to understand when you go in, you don't go in and buy a property and then come in and say, hey, I bought a property, I want to do what I got to do. You need to do the research, beforehand. Like I said, there's reasons why you don't want, or even 110, right? In Huntington, you don't want that to look like a Jericho Turnpike either. You want a corporate, type thing. So the
But
communication
there are
is big.
very many examples of what you don't want to look like.
Yeah.
And, we see it all the time. And like, I'll shake my head and I'm like, how the hell did they ever allow this to be built here? And we've got some areas in our town that little by little, and Carlton Avenue is a perfect case in point. When you first approach CI on Carlton and you see the courthouses and then the new hotels, and now we've got a brand new soccer facility and a lovely, beautiful apartments and condos, et cetera. And then all of a sudden you come to Smith and you see the bail bondsman and the muffler shop and like, wow, how did this happen? So we're going to make it better.
So this time I want to open up the forum for questions from other people. If anybody has anyone, please type them in.
Only easy questions.
Only easy ones. Guys, do you have any other ones as well? Okay, so I want to take this opportunity to thank you. It's been a really great experience sitting here and listening to somebody who gets it. And, it gives us hope that we're not going to be beating our heads against the wall to get deals done, and developers will have the same experience coming into you guys. And I hope that this becomes contagious and that it spreads to other townships as well. So thank you so much for the time you spent and for your public service. And we do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I do believe, we have a Supervisors Association in Suffolk County. Rich Schaefer from Babylon is the chair and I'm the vice chair. And we meet periodically and we share ideas. And it's a really, no one should be operating in a silo. And the more that we can come together and share initiatives and ideas, I think the better off we're all going to be. And we do share that idea that, we want to be here going forward and be successful.
So I do have one question, and Angie, you could elect not to answer it. It's a little more political, right? Last November, we had a red wave here on the island, and I think everybody's anticipating that as well. And we lost some good Democrats last time that totally shocked, Laura Curran was one of them, but there was a whole bunch of them. What are you, what are you expecting and what are you doing to, sort of unify people and get votes based on your success, not necessarily based on party?
Well, I think that no matter what party you are, if you don't read the people and you're not realistic about the needs, you're doomed or should be. Some of the progressive initiatives that have taken place have really wreaked havoc on our society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
The bail reform legislation in Albany, I was at a presentation at the LIA with the 3 top law enforcement officials of Suffolk County, the sheriff, the DA, and the police commissioner. And I venture to guess they're all different political parties. Democrat, I know the DA ran on the Republican line, but he's an independent. But every single one of them, their hands were tied with that bail legislation. And, what they said transcends any sector. Let the professionals do their job. They know what they're doing. don't just go past legislation because you think it's going to be the cure and end all. And I said this earlier, without examining the impact down the road of that particular legislation. And certainly, you know, on a state level, they need to look at taxing. You can't, you know, tax the rich, well, they're the ones that are going to leave. And what are you going to be left with? Those that,
Right.
you know, utilize all of the services and aren't going to contribute anything. Then
Right.
where are you going to be?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So listen, to show how serious, so we have the EDAC, right? The Advocacy Committee for Economic Development, but we just got approved for Political Action Committee from New York State. So we are very focused on the people that are moving things forward and improving Long Island. And we're happy to hear today that you're looking to stick it out for another 4 years. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Hopefully next time we get together, we'll do it in person. I much prefer that.
Thanks so much again for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.